Hello, everyone, and on behalf of the Australian Institute of Architects, I'd like to offer you a warm welcome to today's showcase, where we'll be hearing from our industry partner, AWS. My name is Daniel Moore, the Executive Director of the Victorian chapter here at the Institute, and it's my honour to be your host of this showcase session. We acknowledge with deep respect the traditional owners of the land on which you are joining us from today. We acknowledge that it is a privilege to stand on country and walk in the footsteps of those before us, and we pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Today, we are joined by Arnal Shyam, one of the amazing specification consultants from AWS. Arnal will be presenting AWS flush threshold drain solutions, and we will conclude this session with questions at the end. Welcome to our showcase, Arnal, and I'll hand over to you to give us this presentation.
Right. Hello, everybody. Hope your day is off to a fantastic start. First things first, I'd like to say a huge thank you to the AA for giving us this incredible opportunity. We are very excited to be presenting here. On behalf of the team at AWS, a very warm welcome to you all to today's showcase presentation. My name is Arnal Shyam. I'm a specification rep for AWS, based here in Victoria, but also looking after the Tasmania region. Today, I'm thrilled to dive into our flush threshold drainage solutions. These have been designed specifically for our Vantage and Elevate range of doors. So today, I'm going to go over some of the standards that relate to creating a compliant flush threshold, as well as sharing with you guys some of our existing and newest drainage solutions. Now, for those of you not familiar with AWS, a little bit of a quick overview on who we are. So this year, we're celebrating a big milestone for us, 30 years in the industry. In that short amount of time, we've become one of the leading suppliers of aluminium windows and doors in Australia. But what makes us even prouder is that all our systems are designed, developed, extruded, powder coated, and manufactured right here locally. What that means for us is we have very good control of our supply chain. So whether that's to do with lead times or quality control, we are able to closely monitor that supply. Our windows are then manufactured by one of our independently owned fabricators. We've got over 200 currently all around Australia. AWS itself has facilities in Melbourne, where I'm based, Sydney, which is our head office, Adelaide, Perth, and also Brisbane to support this large network of fabricators. We've got quite an extensive range of products. So we start at our Vantage range, which is primarily designed for residential applications, going all the way through to our Elevate range of products, which is designed for those more architectural style applications and also heavy duty commercial products. So whether you're designing a project that has specific needs around accessibility, energy efficiency, acoustic requirements, or BAL 40, a lot of our systems have been designed specifically to meet those needs. Now let's start today's presentation by looking at why there is an importance for a flush drain solution or a flush threshold in general in the first place. So the need for a flush threshold has been set out and described in both the 2022 NCC under Section D, Access and Egress, and also the Australian standard AS 1428.1, which is designed for access and mobility. So the primary driver for requiring a flush threshold for doors in particular is around providing accessibility for people with disability and also addressing safety concerns. So firstly, in order for us to provide a compliant threshold, we would need to meet the minimum standards for a couple of different standards. First off, we have AS 1428.1. So this is the Australian standard that provides us with guidance on design and also technical requirements to ensure that buildings are designed in creating an environment which is going to be accessible for people with disabilities. We also have AS 4654.2. So this is the standard for waterproofing membranes for above ground use. So it deals with installation of waterproofing systems for above ground areas like balconies, terraces, decks, and other areas exposed to wet weather. Particularly important when we look at the concept of flush drain. Then we've got AS 4586. This is the standard that focuses on slip resistance. So it determines and provides a guideline for the slip resistance of different surface materials and how likely they are to minimize the risk of slips and falls. And lastly, AS 2047. So this is the Australian standard that provides performance requirements for windows and doors which are used in external buildings. It's essentially a standard that ensures that windows are going to be safe, durable, efficient, and comply with your building code requirements. It covers all aspects of performance testing for windows. So it starts off with wind deflection, operating force, air infiltration, water penetration, and finishes with the ultimate strength of a door. So important to know that all doors are required to be tested to AS 2047 when used in a residential application. Having a slightly closer look at AS 1428.1. So this standard specifies the minimum design requirements for new building work as required by the Building Code of Australia and the disability standards to provide access for people with disabilities. It pays particular attention to access ways and circulation space for people who use wheelchairs, access and facilities for people with ambulatory disabilities, and access for people with sensory disabilities. So one of the key areas in this standard that relates to doors is the design of the threshold. So when designing, we need to ensure that doorways are going to be free of steps or raised lips, which you'd see with a traditional door sill. All these things can be considered a barrier for someone with a disability. It's by creating that flush threshold that we can create a smooth navigation between different spaces. So when we pair smooth transitions with adequate turning spaces, we're greatly improving the accessibility for people who in particular use wheelchairs, because it's going to eliminate the need for them to navigate over small bumps and steps, which are considered a hazard. It also allows a person with a disability to have an equal opportunity to move freely from room to room and from indoors to outdoors, especially at exits and entries. And more so in those areas where you have a doorway where you've got very limited area to maneuver. Now, we'll often think of how the standard can help people with a physical disability, but it's also equally important for people with a sensory disability. So that's including visual and auditory. Now, although they may not have a physical disability, they are still very heavily reliant on the tactile feedback they're getting. So having a raised sill or an uneven floor surface can be quite dangerous if you're not able to see those obstacles coming up ahead. So this is probably true for most of us as well. I know myself, I've tripped over many uneven surfaces. And it's also true for little kids. I've got a 3-year-old son at the moment, likes to zip around everywhere. And I can only count the amount of times that he's had a slip or near trip because of that. So when we're designing to AS 1428, it is of course much more than just a threshold design, but for the focus of today, that's what we're going to focus on. But if we are able to incorporate the requirements, we're able to create a much more universal design approach. So we're going to emphasize that spaces are designed to be used by all people to the greatest extent possible. So these flush thresholds, these wide doorways, ample circulation spaces, they're going to ensure that spaces are also future-proof and accommodating needs over time. Next, we have AS 4654.2, waterproofing membranes for above ground external use. The standard provides the performance criteria and deemed to comply solutions for the design and installation of external waterproofing systems for all buildings. Now this detail here, you're probably most familiar with, and it's probably what certifiers pay the most attention to. The clause here is that openings should be protected with a set down or a hob to provide a vertical surface of sufficient dimension to satisfy the requirements. So in most cases, this is what we're being asked to show by our certifiers, either a 50 mil step down, or depending on what state or site you have, could be a little bit more. Now, funnily enough, within this same standard, there's another detail, which is this one here. So this is probably much more overlooked, but it is the alternative solution to the previous. It's only a little bit further down within that same standard, I believe in the next page, where it actually states that where circumstances do not permit the inclusion of a set down or hob, for example, wheelchair access, a gutter shall be formed into the substrate immediately in front of the door opening. So as an alternative solution to a step down or a hob in place, this design concept is permitted, and it's actually the only option that we have when we are dealing with the disability access standard. Now, additionally, a major consideration is going to be to see if the door itself has been tested in this particular situation in conjunction with a drain. So this is where you will still need to check that the door is being tested to AS 2047, the performance requirements for windows and doors, and it is still meeting or exceeding the water resistance rating that it has when it's installed with a drain. Now, in my experience, you'll often be asked by your building certifier to demonstrate compliance with the NCC for the level threshold. Now, the performance requirements of the NCC can be met using a performance solution. So a flush threshold is considered the alternative solution to the deemed to satisfy provisions, and therefore you will require a performance solution to demonstrate compliance with the disposal of surface water from the NCC. Next, we have the standard AS 4586, which is the standard for slip resistance. So this standard classifies pedestrian surface materials according to their frictional characteristics. So it provides us with a guideline to determine the slip resistance of a surface and how likely that surface is going to be at minimizing the risk of slips and falls, which of course is crucial when we're looking at a flush threshold. There's a couple of different specific tests that are used or are outlined as part of the standard. The first is the oil wet inclining platform. So this test is specifically designed to measure the slip resistance of a surface when it's exposed to the wet and also exposed to oil. So simulating a much more hazardous condition, and there's going to be other slippery substrates, substances, present on the surface. Next, we've got the wet barefoot inclining platform test. This test will evaluate the slip resistance of a surface under a wet barefoot condition. So particularly useful for areas like bathrooms, showers, poolside areas, external walkways where you are expecting to be exposed to wet weather. Particularly useful for a drain. Then you also have the wet pendulum test. So the wet pendulum test is probably the most commonly used methods, and it's there to essentially simulate rain or other wet conditions. Basically involves having a pendulum with a rubber slide at the bottom, gets swung across the surface of a material while it's wet. The resistance of that material is then measured as an R value and indicates how likely that surface is to cause a slip under wet conditions. Now, those are some of the standards that we need to consider when we are creating and designing a flush threshold. So firstly, I would like to show you an example of how not to do that. So this example here is basically showing a sliding door installed with no secondary drain. The water egress outlets of the sliding door are completely blocked by the tiles on the external side. So what's wrong with it? So firstly, it's extremely prone to water penetration. So any water that's entering those sliding doors has no clear path of drainage. Sliding doors typically take on water within the sill, and then that water is then drained out in the front of the sliding door. But in this case, we've got the tiles coming right up hard against it. So those drainage outlets would essentially be blocked. Over time, on days where you have a lot of waterfall, the sliding door can essentially fill up with water and overflow. So it can start to pull to the exterior of the external surface, or it can, in a worst case scenario, start pulling into the inside of the building as well. Of course, very bad building practice. We've had no thought about how water gets in and out of the system. There's no clear drainage path. Looking at the picture, it doesn't appear that the tiles on the other side are even sloped away to somewhat mitigate water pooling on the external front of the sliding doors. Most importantly, it does not comply with AS 1428, doesn't comply with 2047 because the door has now lost its ability to drain water, and it does not comply with 4654 for slip resistance because we'll ultimately start to see water pooling in front of that sliding door on that surface, becoming on the tiles particularly quite slippery, a major trip hazard. It starts to become an extremely expensive fix. So initially, the builder may have thought that this is a much faster or cheaper way to install the doors. But in order to fix this now, it is going to be quite a costly exercise. We'll be looking at removing the tiles, potentially removing the sliding door sills to clear out the drainage path, and let alone to see what's happened to the waterproofing membranes and stuff underneath the doors. So cheap in the short term, but in the long term, a very expensive fix. So what are some of the solutions? Well, of course, the solution is to provide a level threshold across the door sill, but to also pair this with a drainage system. This way, we are able to ensure that the doors are still able to take on water and drain it out into that drain, preventing any water ingress. Now, typically we used to see this detail more in commercial environments. So looking at schools, aged care facility, community type of projects. But more and more we're seeing this starting to become popular in the residential market. So some of the reasons for that is it's obviously easier for to enter and exit a space for a person using a wheelchair, but also families. So even if you have a disability, you're not in a wheelchair, but you may be using some mobility aids, something like a walker or crutches, a threshold like this is going to make it much safer for you to maneuver through that area. Again, like mentioned earlier, it is safer for younger children who are always in a hurry from get to one space to the other, and also for pregnant women. So expectant mothers will benefit from a transition like this as well, because it makes it much safer for them and reduces the likelihood of losing their balance. Secondly, it's responsive to the changing needs of home occupants as they age. So often we are designing homes for our clients who may be at an earlier stage in their life. So at that point in time, they can move pretty freely through the home. But for some of these people, that design may actually become a forever home. So although they can move comfortably through the home as it is now, in years to come, when that mobility starts to decline, they may have an increasing need for accessibility throughout that home. These thresholds can actually give you a bit of future-proof to your designs they actually respond to the changing needs of your client. Make sure that that space is still functional and accessible without requiring additional refurbishments in the future. It can even be seen as a selling point where when you are to go and sell a property, it is a home that is suitable for families with younger children, or elderly people who are looking for a retirement place. Of course, it's a much safer environment, reducing the likelihood of trips and falls that we'd normally see with a sliding door. And lastly, from a design point of view, it is it's ideal for creating that seamless transition between spaces, not only physically, but visually as well. So again, as I sort of touched on in the previous slide, we're seeing these used more and more in residential markets. Initially used for accessibility, but now also increasing in popularity due to aesthetics. So they bring a very clean and minimalistic look and a flow that seamlessly blends your indoor and your outdoor spaces. So that smooth transition starts to make the space feel like one big area, a more sort of unified look within that home. Flush thresholds also eliminate that visual barrier that sometimes a raised surface can do. Particularly on those projects where you're trying to create a very open plan feel. Now, if you're using the same sort of floor finishes inside and out, that's even better. That flush threshold can actually bring a bit of consistency and continuity into your designs and give you a sort of uninterrupted flow. So yeah, even if accessibility and isn't a requirement, it adds to that future proof. It adds to the visual aesthetics of a home. When you pair it with a drain, it actually adds to the function of that door. That door is able to still stay waterproof and weatherproof. So it's able to prevent water coming into the home, prevent water pooling outside, prevent wind and drafts coming through your building. I think it's very important that we think about it as a future-proof option as well. So looking at how a space's function will change over time starts to become very important. Now, how do we achieve this here at AWS? So AWS first introduced the float through drain 2016. So this was an integrated drain. It was a full stainless steel drain. So the drain itself was stainless steel and also the grates. We designed this drain initially in collaboration with Echo Drains, who are a leader in this field. We wanted to make sure that we were bringing out a top quality product into the market, not only integrated with our doors and windows, but also was tested to a very high standard. Our products are used all across the state, so we have some areas which the drain has been tested all the way up to a cyclone zone. We also wanted to make sure that this was going to be a solution that ticked all the boxes, particularly for those commercial environments and projects where we're needing to meet all three of the standards we looked at previously. So we used a 316 stainless steel grate. It incorporated 5-star heel safe technology to minimize the risks of slips and falls. So this drain was the complete solution, meets all the standards, and integrated with most of our systems. How this drain used to work. So the drain itself had one rebate, which would be deeper than the sliding doors sitting inside it, or bifold doors. You'd have a secondary rebate, which is where the doors would sit into. There was a dedicated flashing underneath those. There was also a little spacer button that created a small space between the drain and the sliding doors. So that spacer was required because we wanted the doors to still be able to drain in the way it would normally drain as per our previous testing. So as you can see highlighted there in the red is the drainage outlets for the sliding door. This is our series 618 Magnum sliding door residential. So the way that flap works is when there is enough water pressure built up into the frame, the flap will open. It will allow water to then drain down that flashing and into the flow through drain and then out through the various outlets. It also helps prevent any water or air blowing back through the frame because it sort of works one way. So when there's enough water pressure, the flap opens, but from the other side, when you've got positive air and water coming in, it will remain closed. This system had one type of grate, which was the stainless steel. As I mentioned earlier, this one will meet the slip resistance requirements. It's got pips that are on the drainage grates as standard, and that is how that we meet the requirements for slip rating. It's also got a very minimal gaps in between to prevent any a tripping or hazards in there. That was designed to go with most of our Vantage and Elevate and thermally broken sliding door ranges. It was a fully tested system. So we test our sliding doors on their own, of course, to AS2047. And then additionally, we tested them with the drains. The reason we do that is we want to ensure that when we are pairing it with a drain, that we are not losing any water performance out of the door. Or getting any blowbacks from increased wind pressure. Through our testing with the drains, they are all performing as per they would without a drain. So there's no compromise in the performance of those doors. The grates are available for really quite vast amounts of runs. So 15 meters in length is possible to do, which will cover most sliding door applications. Now with this drain here, you could also do a fly screen. Unfortunately, your only option here was to do one on the inside of the building. So here you'd be able to use the Centaur fly screen. So this is a retractable fly screen. And additionally, you would just be extending the rebate into the building. And yeah, so this was a great drain. We still use it up to this day. It is still a current product. But as you can see, it's got a double rebate design, and sometimes that rebate can start getting quite big, which may not be ideal in all scenarios. Works again with a lot of our sliding doors and bifold door systems. So series 852, this is our thermally broken sliding door. It comes top hung and bottom rolling. If you wanted to have a truly compliant solution, I would suggest using the 852 top hung. Reason being, the sill for the sliding door is also raised, so you get a very minimal gap in the sill profile itself, less than 13 millimeters. So very low chance of anything getting trapped in there. So I'll give you a really, really flush looking threshold. Integrates with our series 731 thermally broken sliding doors. Now the drain itself is not going to be thermally broken, but it is packed off, so there's no direct contact with that drain. Also works with our series 704 sliding doors. Those of you not familiar with the 704s, it's quite a wide range of products. 704 comes as a bottom rolling, as a top hung, as a completely recessed frame. One of probably the most go-to solutions in those commercial environments is our 704B. That is a bottom rolling door with a raised track. It gives you a very flush threshold. Again, very minimal tracks in the sill profile as well. Works with our series 618 Magnum sliding doors for residential, our 542, which is our sort of, I guess you could say our base residential sliding doors, and also our really high performing series 471 apartment style sliding doors designed for those really high water ratings. Now, the difference with the flow, this original flow through, is it could also be used with bifold doors. So if you wanted to use it with the bottom rolling, you could use it with our 412. We also have the Series 411, which is the top hung version, and also our Series 52, which is actually sliding doors as well, getting both bottom rolling and top hung. We see bifold doors used quite often in things like schools, for areas that they really want to open up indoor and outdoor flow for the kids. So that was our original flow through. In 2022, we decided to relook at this brief and create the next generation of flush threshold drain. Now, an important aspect of it was that we wanted to create a drain that only required one single level sit down. So you'll recall in the previous images for the flow through, you've got that double rebate where the drain is actually sitting lower than the sliding door or the bifold door itself. So it means that you need to have that double set out. It's a little bit harder for the builder to get it right. Both needs to be, he needs to work out both rebates, et cetera, et cetera. So one at a single level set down. Second one is that we wanted to create a more cost-effective drain. So the previous one was fully stainless steel. It's a very high performing system being stainless steel, but it also has a higher cost associated to that. Now, while making it cost effective, we were sort of considering the cost saving to be in those residential markets where you may not actually need to comply with 1428, the disability standard, but it's something that you want to incorporate into your home as sort of that sleek new feature that's future-proofing your home for any accessibility requirements. And then, of course, we always want to test this drain with the door systems to ensure that they are still meeting, that the doors themselves are still meeting the same level of performance, if not achieving a better rating. We want to add in baffles for wind and waterproofing to ensure that the drainage of the sliding doors is in one direction and that we're not getting water and air ingress coming through with the addition of a drain. That is when we came up with this new Flow Through Pro. I think I've got a short video of it here. So there's a bit of a sneak peek at the new Flow Through Pro. It is shown there with our Series 704 sliding doors. So as you can see from this design, we're now looking at one single rebate. Essentially, this drain starts to act as the subsill and drain for the sliding door. So it's a one-piece solution in this scenario here, where you would install the drain first, and then the sliding doors actually sit inside there as they would normally sit into like a subsill. Again, shown here with our 704 doors. So you can see here that we've also got the raised track in the sill. So this scenario here is showing you a fully compliant threshold. It's also got the stainless steel integrated grate for slip resistance. So probably the most important aspect of it was the single slab rebate. So we now have one single sit down, which makes installation and maintaining the slab integrity much better. It's better for different applications. So when you got multi-story or suspended slab projects, where you would normally need to have a deeper rebate, this type of a product may be much better suited because you have you just require a smaller rebate and therefore can maintain that slab integrity. Your builders in particular will like this. This is going to be much easier for them to work out their slab rebates, the waterproofing details and stuff like that become much more simple. Now, in this particular detail here, We are showing the drain obviously coming through the sliding door and then draining down through an outlet in the drain. Typically, we are nominating those outlets to be around 50 millimeters. So from the testing, that's based on the testing that we've done. Now, of course, if you're getting a performance solution done, they can take into account the length of the door and the site, wind category, things like that, and nominate specific outlets if that's required. You also have the ability to create an outlet through the face of the drain as well. So if you wanted to drain out instead of vertically down, you could drain horizontally out under tiles or something like that as well if you wanted. Nice, easy rebate will allow you to have the same interior and exterior floor surfaces aligned much easier. And now we also offer aluminium grates. So actually, stepping back, important to say the original flow through was a stainless steel drain. This itself is fully extruded in aluminium. So we've got a couple of different options for grates, but the drain itself will be aluminium, and that's where we are starting to get a bit of that cost saving. It is still a very heavy aluminium section, very robust in its design. The aluminium grates as well, very robust and have a very thick aluminium wool in them. So the reason for that is we do want you to be able to take off the grates if you ever need to clean or maintain those outlets. Sometimes you'll see some of these grates are really thin, and if you're taking them out, you can damage them, but this is a very strong and robust grate. Because it's aluminium, you can now powder coat this to match your windows and doors. Available in a very wide range of powder coat colors. You can even get them anodized, and you can even have textured powder coats as well. It's a bit of a cross-section detail of the new Flow-Through Pro. This is being shown here with our Series 759 comforted sliding doors. Sliding doors are designed for energy efficiency and a very minimal aesthetic. So when paired with the drain, you're able to fully recess this door. What I'd like to show you here is that those are the cold-extruded Santoprene baffles, very similar to what we saw in the initial flow through, but this here is actually placed in the drain itself. So now when there is enough water pressure built up, obviously those flaps will open. That will allow water to come through and drain down out through those outlets. But at the same time, when we are getting air turbulence and things coming through that drain, those flaps close back up. So they're preventing any draft from blowing back in or blowing any water back up through the profiles, which is equally as important to stop water coming back up as it is making sure that water is coming out of that frame. The drain itself, of course, now being more like a one-piece solution where it is actually the subsill for the door as well. We've added some additional dead load supports. So those are like central legs placed in the middle of the, I guess, subsill area of the doors. As designs start to develop, as we mainly see in design, should I say, is windows and doors are getting larger and larger. So those dead load supports are really designed to support very heavy panels with large IGUs. That support is designed to make sure that that still stays nice and true, doesn't lose integrity over time, and ensures that your doors are going to be sliding perfectly, even with those big heavy panels sitting on the drain. Now, the part I like about this new Flow-Through Pro is the fact that you've got a few customization options. So you've got the three different grates. Your first grate is a stainless steel grain. So it's like the same grate that we would use in the original Flow-Through. So this drain here is what you'd be using if you wanted to look for compliance, like full compliance particularly with AS 4586 for slip resistance. This grade has got those raised pips in it, and it is compliant to that standard. So if you're putting this drain into projects like aged care facilities, schools, community centers, where you need to meet the full requirements for accessibility, you will need to use this grade. It is stainless steel, so that is the only finish you'll get on it, but it will meet the full requirements. Where you don't need to meet the AS 4586, so like in a residential setting, you are now able to use the aluminium grades. Here you've got much more design flexibility of how they look, so you can start to pair it up and match it to the powder coat of the windows. You can have it as an anodized finish if you wanted it like a clear anodized, for example. If you wanted it to still sort of look like that stainless steel grade or an aluminium grade, but at a much cheaper price point. I would also recommend looking into textured powder coat. So although the aluminium drain is not completely slip resistant or tested for slip resistance, adding a textured powder coat like a texturer or a structurer by Interpon can in theory add some more grip to that slip resistance. And lastly, we have the aluminium with tile inserts. So this tile insert is basically designed to help blend the drain with your external floor finishing, basically hide the drain altogether if we can. In here, you can put any type of tile, tile inserts, pavers, timber decking, whatever you want really. Even put something unique that you've designed yourself to hide that drain. So it does take a tile up to 12 millimeters thick. Sorry, deep. And it is probably the most cost effective. If we look at cost throughout the three, probably looking at the tile insert being the most cost effective, the aluminium, and then the stainless steel, of course, being the premium. Now the Flow-Through Pro at this stage is currently only suitable for sliding door systems. Because it becomes the subsill for the doors, it is a dedicated design for each and every one. With the Flow-Through Pro, it was more just a design of the drain itself, so it was able to interface with much more products. This one here being specifically designed, currently has a limited amount of products, but still covers a very wide range of applications, like the 704s, again, available as 704B, FBR, top hung, etc. 704B is the most commonly used, as mentioned earlier, to meet all those accessibility requirements. The 758, which is our high performance residential system. So you can use the Flow-Through Pro for a 2 or a 3-track system, or you could use it for a 3-track system and also pair it with a fly door as well, which is important. Because previously with the Flow-Through Pro, you were only able to have that retractable screen. Similarly with the 759, you're able to use a 2 or 3-track version and pair it up with the fly door. 731 being the thermally broken, again able to pair this up with the fly doors. And then our series 50 and 52 doors, more designed for those commercial applications. Or can be used in a residential setting for those really big size panels. Then the commercial 852, which is the thermally broken version of the 52 doors. I'll just give you a summary overall what the new Flow-Through Pro is. So it's designed for aesthetic and that comfort appeal. Flush thresholds are there to enhance that sleek and modern design look, gives you a bit of a luxury feel to a home, gives you that visually continuous space from inside to outside, and also, of course, makes it much easier for people to walk through. Drains are very important for accessibility purposes, so whether we are designing for true compliance with 1428 for wheelchair accessibility, ambulatory disabilities, or sensory disabilities, drains are there to make it a much safer environment for everyone. It's safe, and it's also future-proofing your design. So whether you're designing for a client who's fit and able right now, later on, it is ensuring that that home or that space is able to be used by all people in the future, and enhancing everyone's experience of that space. That pretty much sums up my presentation on the new drains. I hope everyone is able to get a bit of an insight into what standards relate to those drains, what solutions we may have available. Of course, please feel free to reach out to me directly if you'd like to learn more about the drains. We've got a really wide range of information available that I'm happy to share with you all, and also assist you on a project-specific basis. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arnold. That was a wonderful presentation, very, very thorough. And just as you mentioned that our members can reach out to you directly, are you able to share your email address with everyone?
Yes, so my email is a_Shyam, which is SHYAM, at awsaustralia.com.au. So please feel free to reach out.
Wonderful. All right, well, I have a few questions for you just to follow up where architects may be requiring a little bit more information on the projects that they're working on, where they may want to specify the flow-through or the flow-through Pro or any of the other AWS systems that are relevant here. How do your flush threshold draining solutions integrate with different waterproofing systems, such as liquid membranes or sheet waterproofing, to prevent failures at junctions?
Okay, that's a great question. I think when it comes to the different types of membranes in various applications, we like to look at it on a project-specific basis and work through with the architect and also those membrane suppliers to ensure that they are both compatible. Yeah, so I think we like to review those on a product-specific basis.
Right, okay. And what is the maximum water intake capacity of your drainage systems, and how does it compare to other industry benchmarks?
Okay, so we test our drains to AS2047, which is of course the standard for windows and doors. So we will typically test them to the water rating of the door. So with the new drains, they have been tested as high as 550 pascals of water. So to give you an example, that will take you all the way up to like an N4, N5 rating. The flow through, the original flow through drain that was designed in conjunction with ACO gets a much higher water rating. It can almost go up to cyclone zone 4. Often we will also get a performance solution done specifically for the site. So we'll look at those specific water requirements and site conditions, and then the outlets will be designed on that. But I can certainly share some indicative outlet sizes and centers that we use for our testing to ensure that they're meeting at least the sort of the 450, 550 Pascal water ratings.
Right, okay. So that sort of leads on to my next question, which is when specifying flow-through or flow-through Pro, what does AWS recommend with regards to slab thickness to allow for adequate drain depth and fall? And I believe you also just mentioned then, centers of drains.
Okay, so well, obviously the slab depth and things like that, we would recommend you speak to your engineers and obviously work that out. The drains itself are typically around about 70 millimeters. And then on top of that, you'd be looking at around about 10 millimeters of packing. So if you allow for an overall rebate of around about 80 millimeters into the slab, that will cover your drain. Now, the depth of it will vary. So it can be as the rebate for like a 2-track system could be around about 140 mil. But depending on how many tracks you have, if you're looking to add like a retractable fly screen or something like that, then that can start to step out that rebate quite a bit. But typically around 80 mil of slab rebate covers most times.
Yeah, great. I guess we're going to, sorry, yes, go on.
No, so most of the times that drain is going to be used with a 55 mil door sill.
Mhm.
So 55 mil dorsal is sort of one of the sort of higher performing dorsals. So we typically don't use like a 35 or anything like that. 55 gives us really good water performance and also gives us enough depth for the drain to actually be able to take on water.
Yeah, great. And I think this is where architects are going to be working with their structural engineers to make sure they've got plenty of depth in that slab, and also their hydraulic consultants as well, just to make sure that
Absolutely.
that fall is taking the water away from the building nice and smoothly. Is AWS able to provide BIM details showing the drainage system interface with door frames, floor finishes, and structural slabs, so that then architects can see how all this is working in 3D?
Absolutely. So, well, currently we've only got these available as 2D details, but we've got quite an extensive range of those details available. So, even for the original flow through, like a full installation guide with all your waterproofing, rebate depths, etc. With the new Flow Through Pro, we've got the same for all door systems. I think it's coming in the future that we try to integrate this with our BIM models. It's a big task for us. We've got so many sliding door systems at the moment, and we will need to go redo those BIM models with the drains. So it's coming in the future.
It's the constant problem, for product suppliers, that you've always got to keep up with the BIM models that people are asking for. So that's wonderful to hear that AWS
Absolutely.
is working on that. And then you did touch on this, that with the difference between the flow through and the flow through pro was that you were trying to address issues like how does the system manage potential thermal bridging at the threshold, and do you offer thermally broken components to minimize heat loss?
So the drains itself are not thermally broken, but they're separated from the profile. So you don't actually have the aluminium on aluminium touching.
Mhm.
So that there is how we will be minimizing that. They're all packed off on nylon packers.
Great. Okay. Well, that's all the questions that I have for you today, Arnold. But thank you so much for giving the wonderful new flow through system that AWS has. And for any of our members who are watching, you can absolutely contact Arnold and you can get more information on Flow Through Pro, and any of the other AWS systems that are on offer. So thank you so much, Arnold. And we look forward to speaking with you again in the near future.
Thanks so much for having us, Daniel. And as you mentioned, please feel free to reach out with me. We've got a lot of samples and things available, and also a showroom. So if you ever wanted to pop by and actually see some of these things, please do get in touch.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.